On the morning of Saturday, April 15th, 2010, at approximately 10 a.m., several curious neighbors stood across the street from Elaine Jones's residence, shocked and dismayed by police circling the house with crime scene tape. As more official vehicles arrived, the most noticeable being the coroner's van, those watching the scene unfold could not have possibly imagined the horrific death that their 91-year-old neighbor had suffered the night before at the hands of a vicious, merciless killer. Elaine Jones, or Mrs. Jones, as she was called by dozens of home economics students during her 26 years of teaching them to cook and sew in preparation for life after high school. She was a strict but fair teacher who didn't play games when it came to taking her course seriously. I can still hear her shouting, "This is not study hall. You are going to respect my class, or you can go to Mr. Jolly's office right now." Years later, after college, I was in a fabric store at the local mall talking to the clerk when I heard someone say from across the room, "Is that you, Hughes?" The voice was as familiar as ever. It was Mrs. Jones calling me by my last name as she did with several students. She had aged very little. I guessed her to be in her early 70s, but she still possessed that regal and stern expression she'd used for years to keep unruly students in line. She cracked a quick smile and said, "What are you doing with yourself these days, young lady?" We chatted for several minutes, then said our goodbyes and left the store. That was the last time I spoke to Mrs. Jones. Like nearly everyone in my community, I was devastated and angered by the brutality of the crime. Why would anyone inflict such brutal punishment on a defenseless 91-year-old woman? Mrs. Jones was a home economics teacher at the former P.W. Moore High School from September 1954 to 1969, when the school system became integrated. She then went to Elizabeth City High School, where she taught 7th through 9th graders until her retirement in June 1980. She immediately became a very private person, secluding herself in her beautiful brick home on the corner of Southern Avenue and Parkview Drive, two well-traveled streets in the small North Carolina town, where she and her husband, one of the first black general practitioners in Elizabeth City, resided together until his death several years prior to her retirement. She was well known by local residents as an expert gardener who painstakingly tended and nurtured her flowers religiously every morning that the seasons permitted. Her shocking death sent panic throughout the small town. A crime of this magnitude, brutalizing and killing an elderly person in their own home, was rare to never, especially where Elaine Jones lived next to the Elizabeth City State University campus, a 24-hour security institution. Again, the community asked, who could possibly commit such a heinous crime against a victim so vulnerable, a proud and respected woman who was totally independent at 91 years old, and also the primary caretaker for her older 93-year-old sister who lived with her and suffered from Alzheimer's disease. In 2010, Davey Alexander, 61, looked more like 41. He was a handsome man, and although still attractive to women in their 30s and 40s, his preference was older women. He had breezed into Elizabeth City in the 1990s from Philadelphia, and supposedly was gainfully employed until he became addicted to crack cocaine. He had first spotted Mrs. Jones at her church and found a way to start a conversation with her. She dismissed him with a stern glance and hadn't given him a second thought until one night loud knocks woke her from a sound sleep. She looked through the peephole. It was that Alexander man from church. "Can you loan me a 20, ma'am?" he mumbled through a thick voice. "Go away. I don't have anything for you," she shouted. A few days later, a neighbor reportedly told Mrs. Jones that she had seen a man matching Davey Alexander's description lurking in the shadows around the side of her house. He had been hanging in the neighborhood, asking to do yard work for elderly people. Mrs. Jones had told 2 or 3 friends, that Alexander had come to her residence several times at night, knocking on the door and asking for money. Each time she had told him to leave her alone. Saturday, April 15, 2010, between 1 and 3 a.m., Elaine Jones is jolted awake by a loud noise coming from her living room. She grabs a makeshift weapon and slowly opens her bedroom door to see a dark figure in the dim room staring directly at her. The assailant bolts into her and knocks her to the floor. Strong-willed, the 91-year-old nonagenarian was able to escape his grasp and dragged herself to her bedroom. Just as she tries to pull herself into the room, he grabs her by the feet, gets on his knees, and starts pounding her head and neck over and over with the full impact of his fists. Mrs. Jones withstands the bloody barrage of blows until she no longer can and loses consciousness, then dies, with her sister watching helplessly a few feet away. A caretaker for Mrs. Jones' sister arrived around 11 the next morning and found a broken window in the garage. She immediately called the Elizabeth City Police Department, who arrived shortly after her call. They entered the residence through the garage door that showed evidence of forced entry. The officers moved cautiously through the spacious house, clearing their way to the living room where they saw broken furniture, several money wrappers, a purse, and a jewelry box on the floor. Weapons drawn, they continued down a hallway to the first bedroom. A king-size bed was in the center. Mrs. Jones lay at the foot of the bed. Her gray hair was crimson red. Her eyes were wide and frozen in fear. Police suspected that what started as a home invasion had turned deadly when Mrs. Jones discovered the intruder in her living room. Apparently, the attack started there, then escalated to the bedroom where the killer ruthlessly bludgeoned her to death. One of the officers called in the crime. Another continued searching the house and found Mrs. Jones' 93-year-old sister in an adjacent bedroom. She appeared to be unharmed. The erect position of her body must have given her a bird's-eye view of her sister's murder. After being told of her condition, police knew she would not be able to give any details about the killer. Almost immediately, authorities began receiving information that Davey Louis Alexander might have been involved in Mrs. Jones' murder. Apparently, he had spent silver coins that had belonged to her at several area businesses, including at the Par 3 course at Knobs Creek Recreation Center, where he paid for a round of golf. A Pasquotank grand jury indicted Alexander on charges of stealing $30 worth of silver coins from Elaine Jones. First-degree burglary, felony larceny, and first-degree kidnapping would later be added to his charges. Police detective and lead investigator Jerry Boyce of the Elizabeth City Police Department told reporters that Davey Alexander had skipped town before a warrant could be issued for his arrest. He assured the public that every means at their disposal would be employed to find Alexander to bring him to justice for the brutal murder of Mrs. Jones. District Attorney Frank Parrish said he would likely seek the death penalty in the case. Federal marshals and a Department of Correction unit eventually tracked Davey Alexander down in Maryland, where he was staying with an elderly woman he had befriended in June 2010. Officers pulled him from under a bed and cuffed him. He was placed under arrest and transported back to Pasquotank County, where Elizabeth City Police led him from the police station to the magistrate's office in rainy weather. He was charged with the first-degree murder of Elaine Jones and was held at Albemarle District Jail in lieu of a $1.1 million secured bond. Nearly 3 years after her murder, on January 8, 2013, Davey Louis Alexander, then 65, confessed in Pasquotank County Superior Court to the bludgeoning death of 91-year-old Elaine Jones at her Parkview Drive, Elizabeth City, North Carolina residence on April 15, 2010. Assistant District Attorney Nancy Lamb said prosecutors initially planned to seek the death penalty, but after consulting with members of Jones' family, had agreed to a plea arrangement that would confine Alexander to prison for life without the possibility of parole. As a result of his plea agreement, Davey Alexander gave up his right to appeal a conviction had the case gone to trial. The District Attorney's Office, for its part, withdrew additional charges against Alexander of first-degree burglary, felony larceny, and first-degree kidnapping. Lamb believes justice was done in the case, but expressed sadness about Mrs. Jones's violent death. She was a well-loved, well-respected member of this community. David Lewis Alexander is currently incarcerated at Piedmont Correctional Institution, a medium custody prison in Salisbury, North Carolina. He's still handsome at 77 years old, but thankfully the projected release date for this deprived monster is death.